What's up, fellas? Um, Man, we're getting close. I know all of us not too long ago had no idea when we'd be back, and quite honestly, if we'd even be back or not. But it's looking like we're getting really close. June 8th, so next week we'll be back and rocking and rolling. So if you hadn't already got signed up for SAC camp, you need to get that done. The expectation is that we're all here, and you need to have that physical stuff taken care of. Take care of your business, bottom line. So, last week we talked about personal growth, and we said personal growth is what drives team growth. And so, as we talk about getting prepared for the season under unusual circumstances, unprecedented circumstances, really the stuff that we're talking about, in my opinion, has a greater impact now than at any other time in our lives. And so, how well we do these things give us an advantage over other teams. And it'd be silly not to think that other teams aren't working out and doing some of those things. They are, but how well we do the character stuff and how well we control our actions, behaviors, and all those things we've talked about will take us to a different level than they are. That is a measured advantage that we have over other teams. So let's not overlook those things, and let's be different. Let's be different in the right way. So last week we talked about personal growth. We talked about how it drives team growth. And then specifically we talked about your 20 square feet and how you control that 20 square feet, what goes on inside that 20 square foot box, and only you do. So with that, moving to the next part that we talked about in the past before we got out, talked about above the line and below the line behaviors. And so I want you to think about those above the line and below the line behaviors. And just as a refresher course, above the line behaviors are the behaviors that are discipline driven. And so those are the ones that are intentional, they're on purpose, they're skillful behaviors. Below the line behaviors, again, are default driven. They're impulsive, they're on autopilot, they're resistant to change. And so obviously we want to be above the line. And I think you guys were doing a great job, and hopefully have continued to call each other out and hold each other accountable, as well as yourself, being above the line versus below the line in your behaviors. And so I want you to discuss with your unit and your unit leader, I want you to discuss during the pandemic, what are some of the following actions and behaviors that you have seen? And specifically, we're talking about your teammates, about some guys that within your unit, or maybe outside your unit, but certainly teammates that you've seen. And so first of all, think of, sometimes it's easier to think of the negative, but think about some of the impulsive behaviors that you've seen. What are some things that your teammates have done that you would say, man, that's impulsive and it's below the line? It's not something that makes us a better team. And then what are some things that, some on autopilot behaviors, some things that are just done on autopilot? What are some things that are resistant behaviors? And again, all of these are below the line behaviors that don't make us a better team. And so I want you to have that discussion with your unit leaders and with your unit and share some ideas. And then secondly, I want you to come back and let's flip it. Let's think about what you've seen some teammates do that are above the line behaviors. So what are some intentional behaviors that you have seen your teammates do? And right now we're talking about teammates that you've witnessed or have heard about, or whatever it may be, or know they do. And then second of all, what are some on-purpose behaviors that they've done that have either seen or heard about or know that they've done? And then lastly, what are some skillful behaviors that they've done and they've really worked on and done during this time? And so discuss that with your team. And then I want you to come back and I want you to really be honest with yourself and your teammates. And I want you to try to list those things and talk about those things that you personally have done. And there's going to be some things that kind of sting a little bit. There's some things that we don't want to talk about, where our own failures. We don't want to talk about our below the line behaviors. But this goes back to the trust factor that we talked about earlier with your teammates. You got to trust your teammates are all about making you better and holding each other accountable. And you got to be willing to not only talk about your successes, but also talk about the areas you got to get better, so we can all hold each other accountable for that. And hopefully with that, you're still using the habit share with your unit leader, and then with each other you should be doing, and they should be holding you accountable that your unit leader should be doing that too. So make sure that you guys are all doing that with each other. I know some of the groups have shared that with me and doing a great job with it. So next, what are some of the habits, the above the line habits that you have developed? And remember, not just behaviors, but now we're talking about habits that you've created, something you continue to do over and over and over. And what are some that need to remain after June 8th, when we start workouts June 8th next week? What are some of those habits that need to remain? What are some of the ones that need to stick around that you've developed that are really good? And think about those. And then conversely, what are some below the line behaviors and habits that have been created through this time that got to go? They don't make us better as a team. They don't make you better as a person. The personal growth within your 20 square feet is not what we want to see, not what you want to see. Doesn't lead to your goals, doesn't lead to our team's goals. So what are some of those habits? They got to go. They got to get out. We got to get rid of them. And then I want you, all this ties in, of course, with the E plus R equals O. The events plus responses equals outcomes. And so, start thinking about that. We need big E's, because big E's and big O's require big R's. And so right now is our time again. We have a chance to have an advantage over other teams if we take this stuff seriously and we get better and we engage in our E plus R equals O and the R factor. If we do that in an above the line manner, if we're discipline driven, if we're intentional in how we do it, and we do it on purpose and skillful, and not the other way and just let it happen. And so be very cognizant of that as we do it. We're in a culture building time right now that will carry us through the season, or it will affect us negatively during the season. And so obviously we want to be able to overcome these things, because the more people we have in that top 20%, top 10%, and really that's what we talked about, is getting to the top 10. Don't be in the 80. And certainly don't be in the bottom 10. We're not worried about those guys. But don't be in the 80. Anybody be in the 80. But be in the top 10. How do you get in the top 10% of these things? So next week, we're gonna start reviewing again the steps to the R factor. And, a lot of you guys remember those. But I want to make sure they're fresh in your mind. You're thinking about those things. You're reinforcing them. You're holding each other accountable. So, again, we talked about BCD last week. Make sure that we really continue holding each other accountable. That, be aware of it. Don't engage in it. And then next of all, really be thinking about above the line and below the line behaviors and which ones you're engaging in. Man, I love you guys. Fired up, ready to get cranked up. We've got a great plan. It's going to be different. But, hey, whatever. Different is good. And so there'll be a lot of good things that come out of this. And all I know is you guys are men of character. We've been preparing this for something like this with the stuff we've been doing and spending time together. And so we got that. That is an advantage. And that is something we have that others don't have to the level that we have. So, again, fired up to see you next week. And, man, love you, and let's rock and roll and make this the best year ever. All right, peace out.